Welcome to the book of Jude, the last of the New Testament epistles, and the strangest. Man, Jude is weird. I wonder if Jesus ever thought that growing up with the guy. I mean, they were brothers after all. Jude addresses his letter as being from Jude, a servant of Jesus Christ and brother of James. I mean, it was far too presumptuous for him to say, I am the brother of Jesus. But everybody knows that James is the brother of Jesus, and that means Jude is his brother too. But neither of these guys, Jude nor James, believed in Jesus during his earthly ministry. You remember that story? Let's check it out in Matthew 13, the end of Matthew 13, when Jesus returned to his hometown of Nazareth, taught in their synagogue for a bit, and then the people, they asked, man, isn't this just the carpenter's son? I mean, we know his mother. Her name's Mary. And are not his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Now, a little spoiler alert for you. Judas here in the Greek is Iudas. It is the same word as Jude and Judah and Judas. It's all the same. One Greek word, and it comes from the Hebrew word Judah. Now, after the resurrection, the brothers of Jesus got themselves sorted out a little bit. They believed in him, and they all became leaders in the Judean church. James, the oldest of the brothers, became foremost among them. He was the leader in the church in Jerusalem, and he wrote his little epistle to Jewish Christians. And so did Jude. Jude wrote to Jewish Christians. Now, we don't know that from the opening of his letter. All that it says here is that it's from Jude to those who are called and beloved in God the Father and kept for Jesus Christ. And that's beautiful, but it doesn't tell us a whole lot, does it? Now, we can deduce that Jude is writing to Jews because his letter is so weird. I mean, he couldn't limit himself to quoting just from the Old Testament in his epistle. No, he had to go on and quote from a whole bunch of other weird texts that are definitely not in the Old Testament. Texts like the book of 1st Enoch and the Testament of Moses. You know, that story about the archangel Michael disputing with the devil over the body of Moses and whether it should be buried or not. I mean, that's in the book of Deuteronomy, isn't it? Oh, wait, it isn't. It's in the Testament of Moses. And only Jews who grew up reading these kind of things would understand how Jude is applying these stories to their specific situation. And consequently, it's probably why Peter, who's writing to Gentiles, took these stories out when he copied the letter of Jude word for word. Wait a second, did I just say that Peter copied Jude? Well, he kind of did. I mean, look at some of these examples, these similarities between the letter of 2 Peter, specifically chapter 2, and the letter of Jude. Look at this. They deny our only master. Sodom and Gomorrah serves as an example in their destruction. Sodom and Gomorrah is an example. They reject authority, these people that both Jude and Peter are writing against. They are like unreasoning animals, irrational animals, creatures of instinct, who understand things instinctively, who will be destroyed. They feast with you. They are waterless clouds, waterless springs, swept along by the wind, driven by a storm. Now, most scholars agree that Peter borrowed from Jude. Somehow, the letter of Jude came across his desk in his office, and Peter's just reading through it, and he's like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I've got a problem just like this in my church. Where's my pen? Okay, I'm going to make a couple of changes here, and perfect, sign my name Peter, send it off. Plagiarism wasn't a thing back then. Yes, it was. But anyways, Peter adapted Jude's letter to his own specific situation. Of course, there were similarities between Peter's situation and Jude's. Now, what was Jude's situation? We ought to talk about that. Well, let's open up the book of Jude and find out, why don't we? All right, back to the letter of Jude. Let's just see how short this baby is. It is a short little letter. There it is. A little bit hard to read when it's that size, so we're going to zoom in. Now, we're talking about the situation that Jude is writing into. Now, he really wanted to write about, so eager to write about our common salvation. You know, the fact that Jesus is going to, let me see, I got to scroll down. Okay, Jesus is going to return in glory and majesty, and he's going to rule over the earth in perfect righteousness, and we will rule together with him by his side forever and ever. Amen? I mean, wouldn't you want to write about that? Unfortunately, poor Jude, he was prevented, that is, necessity prevented him from embarking on that glorious subject, and he found it necessary to write instead, appealing you to contend for the faith. That's the thesis of the letter of Jude. Contend for the faith. Now, this word contend, it's got conflict and tension in view, doesn't it? The gospel is under attack, and the church must defend itself from that attack. Well, who's attacking the gospel here in the letter of Jude? Well, Jude says that certain people have crept into the church unnoticed. These guys, down in verse 12, they're hidden among you. They are hidden reefs at your love feasts as they feast together with you without fear. They're sharing the table with you. They're sharing the Lord's Supper, and yet they're hidden. They're like a hidden reef. They're like a rock that's just under the water. And as your ship is just coming along, it runs into that rock and it crashes and it's destroyed and it sinks to the bottom of the sea. That's who Jude is writing to confront and to warn his church against these hidden reefs. So let's see, where are we? What is the defining characteristic of these hidden reefs, these people who've crept into the church? Well, they pervert the grace of God into sensuality. That's it. That's where these guys went wrong. Pervert the grace of God into sensuality. You see, in God's grace, through the death of Jesus, he has freely forgiven us. And now that we're in the age of the new covenant, Jews to whom Jude is writing, they're free from practicing the Mosaic law. They don't have to do that anymore. From this grace, these false teachers reasoned that they are completely free from any and all moral restrictions. They're forgiven anyways, therefore they can do whatever they want. That's the problem with these false teachers that Jude is writing to address. His message, therefore, is a scathing attack against these antinomian, lawless, false teachers. And so he says, you will be judged. And the way that he says it is through a series of examples from the past. And these examples are just arranged so perfectly, so neatly. I love Jude for the way that he structures his book. You see, there are, in 5 through 19, in this first section, 5 to 10, there are 3 examples from the Old Testament of rebellion and God judging that rebellion. And then there's 3 more examples of rebels who specifically are corrupting other people. And then once he completes these 6 examples, then he shares 2 warnings. The first one is an ancient warning from Enoch, 7th from Adam. And then he has a final warning. This is a recent warning from the apostles themselves in 17 to 19. Now we're going to trace how Jude applies these warnings and these examples to his own batch of rebels next.